She walked into that coffee shop wearing diamonds that cost more than most people's cars, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to someone's heartbreak. Marcus looked up from his laptop, completely unaware that this moment would define the next decade of his life. She smiled at him, that practiced smile wealthy people use when they want something. He smiled back, genuine and warm, because that's who he was. What happened next exposed the cruel reality of how some people treat others as experiments, as entertainment, as something to use and discard. But karma has a way of evening the score, and 12 years later, when her entire world was crumbling, the last person she expected to see was the man whose heart she'd shatter for a bet. Before getting into what happened, drop a comment telling where you're watching from. New York, London, Manchester, Los Angeles, Toronto, and let everyone know if you've ever had someone pretend to care about you just to use you. This story hits different when you realize it happened to someone real, and the ending absolutely nobody saw coming. Her name was Victoria Ashford, and she'd never worked a day in her life. At 23, she lived in a penthouse her father bought, drove a car her trust fund paid for, and wore clothes that cost what some families spent on rent. She wasn't evil, not exactly, just incredibly bored and dangerously disconnected from how normal people lived. Her friends were the same, children of tech moguls, real estate empires, and old money that went back generations. They spent their days at exclusive clubs, their nights at parties that cost more to throw than Marcus made in a year. Marcus Washington was 25, working 2 jobs to put himself through a master's program in urban development. He spent mornings as a teaching assistant, afternoons studying in coffee shops because his apartment was too small and too loud, and evenings waiting tables at an upscale restaurant where people like Victoria would leave $100 tips without thinking twice. He was brilliant, driven, and kind in a way that came from understanding struggle. His mother had raised 3 kids alone after his father died, and Marcus had watched her work herself to exhaustion so they could have opportunities she never had. They met on a Tuesday afternoon in October at Cornerstone Coffee, a spot between Victoria's luxury gym and Marcus's university. She was there because her usual place was closed for renovation. He was there because the library was packed during midterms. Their worlds had no business intersecting, but Victoria's friend Brittany had just gotten dumped by her boyfriend, and the group needed entertainment. "I'm so bored I could scream," Victoria had texted her friends. "Nothing interesting ever happens anymore." That's when Brittany suggested it. You know what would be hilarious? Pick some random poor guy and make him fall for you. Like, really fall. Then ghost him. Just to see if you can do it. Victoria's other friends jumped on the idea immediately. They bet $5,000 she couldn't pull it off for at least 3 months without the guy catching on. $5,000 Victoria didn't need, but the challenge? That interested her. She'd never failed at anything she set her mind to. Marcus was studying housing inequality when Victoria sat down at his table, even though a dozen empty tables surrounded them. "Mind if I sit here? Everywhere else seems too sunny," she said, her voice carrying that boarding school polish. He looked up, surprised. "Sure, no problem." She'd chosen him deliberately, attractive enough to make it interesting, obviously struggling financially based on his worn backpack and generic laptop, and black, which Brittany had specifically suggested would make the whole thing more dramatic for their social circle. The casual racism of that comment should have made Victoria reconsider, but it didn't. She was already thinking 3 moves ahead. For the first month, Victoria played her part perfectly. She learned that Marcus loved jazz, so she pretended to discover a newfound passion for Miles Davis. She learned he was studying urban poverty, so she asked thoughtful questions about his research, Googling terms later to sound informed. She learned his mother was sick, diabetes complications, and she sent an anonymous gift card to help with medical expenses, knowing he'd mention it and she could act sympathetic. Marcus fell hard and fast, because why wouldn't he? Victoria was beautiful, yes, but more than that, she seemed genuinely interested in his work, his dreams, his life. She listened when he talked about wanting to create affordable housing solutions. She encouraged him when he doubted himself. She showed up at his part-time job and sat in his section, leaving generous tips she claimed were from other customers who'd been impressed by his service. "I can't believe someone like you is interested in someone like me," Marcus told her after 6 weeks of dating. Victoria laughed. touching his face in that way she practiced. Don't say that. You're the most interesting person I've ever met. What Marcus didn't know was that Victoria's friends were receiving regular updates, screenshots of their text conversations, photos of them together that Victoria captioned with mocking commentary. He actually thinks I'm into him. She'd written above a picture of them at a free community concert. He brought flowers he probably couldn't afford. I am dying. The group chat exploded with laughing emojis and increasingly cruel jokes. But they also pushed her to keep going, to make it more convincing, to really make him believe. The bet had evolved. Now it was about how devastated they could make him when Victoria finally pulled the plug. 3 months became 4, became 5. Something strange started happening that Victoria refused to acknowledge. She was enjoying his company, not in the way she'd expected, not as a joke, but genuinely. Marcus was funny without trying to be. He was passionate about things that mattered. He introduced her to his world, not fancy restaurants, but hole-in-the-wall places with incredible food, not exclusive clubs, but community events where people actually talked to each other, where they cared about each other. His mother, Patricia, met Victoria in month 5. She's lovely, Patricia told Marcus privately. But baby, are you sure about this? She comes from a different world. Mom, none of that matters, Marcus insisted. She sees me for who I am. Patricia wanted to believe him, but mothers know things, and something about Victoria's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The breaking point came at Marcus's birthday dinner, a small gathering he'd organized at his cramped apartment. He'd invited his closest friends, his siblings, his mother. Victoria showed up late, overdressed in Chanel, while everyone else wore casual clothes from Target and thrift stores. She looked around the apartment. The mismatched furniture, the tight space, the simple decorations, and Marcus saw something flash across her face before she controlled it. Disgust? Pity? He couldn't tell. But she recovered quickly, laughing and charming everyone present. His friends loved her. His mother remained quietly skeptical. The evening went well, until Victoria's phone buzzed repeatedly with messages. She excused herself to the bathroom, and in her hurry, left her phone on the arm of the couch. Marcus wasn't the type to snoop, but when another message lit up the screen, his sister Keisha happened to glance over. What she saw made her blood run cold. The message preview showed Victoria's group chat, and the most recent message read, OMG, how much longer do I have to pretend to care about urban housing projects? This is torture. The bet better be worth it. Keisha grabbed the phone and scrolled up before anyone could stop her. She saw months of messages. Victoria mocking Marcus's clothes, his job, his apartment, his dreams. She saw her friends' cruel commentary, the racist jokes, the detailed plans of the breakup they were orchestrating for maximum emotional damage. She saw Victoria's own words. He's actually starting to bore me. I think I've milked this long enough. Should I dump him at the restaurant where he works? That would be iconic. Marcus, Keisha said, her voice shaking with rage, you need to see this. What followed was one of the most painful moments of Marcus's life. Victoria returned from the bathroom to find Marcus holding her phone, his face devastated, his hands trembling. His entire family stared at her with expressions ranging from fury to heartbreak. Tell me this is fake, Marcus said quietly. Tell me you didn't do this. Victoria opened her mouth, and for a moment, she almost told the truth, almost apologized, almost admitted what she'd done. But her pride, her ego, her entire identity as someone who never failed at anything she attempted, kicked in. Marcus, you're overreacting. Those messages are just jokes between friends. You're taking them out of context. Out of context. His voice rose, something that never happened. You made a bet about me, about my feelings. You pretended to love me so you could win $5,000 from your rich friends. That's not. Get out, Patricia interrupted, stepping between them. Get out of my son's home right now. Victoria looked around the room at the faces staring back at her. Marcus's younger brother had tears in his eyes. Keisha looked ready to physically throw her out. His friends were recording on their phones, probably already planning to expose her on social media. Marcus, please. Victoria tried once more. I loved you. Marcus said, and the pain in his voice was unbearable. I actually loved you. And this whole time, I was just a joke to you. Victoria left, and within 48 hours, the story exploded online. Marcus's friends had posted everything. The text messages. Victoria's profile showed her wealth and privilege. The whole cruel setup. It went viral. Victoria's social media accounts were flooded with thousands of angry messages. News outlets picked it up as an example of classism and racism among wealthy young people. Her father's company faced calls for boycotts. Her mother stopped answering her calls. The friends who'd encouraged the bet suddenly claimed they'd told her not to do it, deleting their messages and blocking her number. Brittany gave an interview calling Victoria disturbed and saying she'd always had concerns. Victoria found herself completely alone, but instead of learning from it, she doubled down. She hired a PR firm. She claimed she was a real victim, that Marcus had used her for her money. Nobody believed her. 12 years passed. Victoria's life had followed a predictable trajectory downward. Her father, disgusted by the scandal and her refusal to take real accountability, had cut her off financially within a year. Her trust fund was frozen until she demonstrated meaningful personal growth, which she never did. She'd bounced between jobs she wasn't qualified for, burned through the money she had access to, and ended up in a small apartment in a neighborhood she once would have sneered at. She'd married a man named Derek 5 years after Marcus' incident, someone from her old circle who'd stuck around. But Derek turned out to be just as bad with money as Victoria. And when his father's company collapsed in a fraud investigation, they lost everything. The house, the cars, the lifestyle, all gone. By 2024, Victoria was 41 years old and working as an administrative assistant, barely making rent, drowning in debt from medical bills after Derek's sudden illness. The final blow came when her landlord informed her the building was being sold to developers. All tenants had 60 days to vacate, and the area had become so expensive that Victoria couldn't find anything she could afford. She was looking at homelessness for the first time in her life, a reality so foreign she couldn't process it. That's when she decided to attend a city council meeting about affordable housing developments. She was desperate, hoping to find resources or connections or something that might help. She sat in the back of the room, barely listening, until they introduced the urban development specialist who'd be speaking about a new housing initiative. Please welcome Marcus Washington, Director of Urban Housing Solutions. Victoria's had snapped up so fast she almost gave herself whiplash. There he was, 12 years older, wearing a sharp suit that actually fit his success, confidence radiating from every word as he presented a comprehensive plan to create affordable housing throughout the city. He'd finished his master's, then his doctorate. He'd worked for the city, then started his own nonprofit. He'd become exactly what he dreamed of becoming, despite everything she'd done to him. After the meeting, Victoria tried to slip out, but Marcus saw her. Their eyes met across the room, and she watched him recognize her, watched surprise flash across his face before he carefully neutralized his expression. She should have left. Instead, she stood frozen as he walked over. Victoria, he said, his tone professionally polite. Marcus, she had no idea what to say. You did it. Everything you wanted to do. Yeah, he replied simply. I did. They stood in awkward silence before Victoria heard herself blurting out, I'm sorry. I know it's 12 years too late, and I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I'm sorry for what I did to you. Marcus studied her face, and she realized he could see everything. The cheap clothes, the exhaustion, the desperation. She was living the life he'd lived when they met, and the irony wasn't lost on either of them. I appreciate that, he said carefully. What brings you here? She almost lied, almost pretended she was there for civic interest, but she was too tired. I'm about to be evicted. I was hoping to find resources or programs or something. I don't have anywhere to go. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Victoria waited for satisfaction across his face, the calm acknowledgement that you deserve this, that she absolutely deserved. Instead, he pulled out a business card and wrote something on the back. Call this number tomorrow. Ask for Jennifer in housing assistance. Tell her I referred you. She'll help you navigate emergency housing resources. and get you on waiting lists for the affordable units we're developing. Victoria stared at the card. Why would you help me? Because, Marcus said, meeting her eyes directly, what you did to me was terrible, and it messed me up for years. I had trust issues. I had therapy bills I couldn't afford. You hurt me badly. But I decided a long time ago that I wouldn't become bitter because of it. I built my career on the principle that everyone deserves stable housing, dignity, and a chance to rebuild. That includes you. Tears streamed down Victoria's face. I don't deserve your help. Maybe not, Marcus acknowledged, but I'm not helping you because you deserve it. I'm helping you because it's who I am. It's what I do. And honestly, the best revenge isn't making you suffer. It's showing you what real character looks like, which is something you and your friends never understood. He started to walk away, then paused. For what it's worth, I hope you figure things out. I hope you become someone who actually cares about people instead of using them. But that's on you to do the work. Victoria stood in that emptying conference room, holding a business card that represented more grace than she'd shown anyone in her entire life. She called the number the next morning. Jennifer was kind, efficient, and within 2 weeks, Victoria was placed in temporary housing through Marcus's program. She eventually qualified for one of the affordable units his organization developed. The thing about rock bottom is that it either destroys you or forces you to rebuild as someone different. Victoria chose differently. She started volunteering at the community center in her building. She went back to school, studying social work at a community college. She attended support groups for people who'd experienced financial devastation. She wrote letters to Marcus that she never sent, working through her own issues, understanding finally what she'd done and why it was so wrong. 3 years after that city council meeting, Victoria was working as a counselor for young adults from wealthy backgrounds who were struggling with entitlement and empathy deficits. She'd become an expert in something she'd once embodied, the dangerous disconnect between privilege and humanity. She never tried to contact Marcus again, understanding that he'd given her enough just by showing her dignity when she'd shown him none. Marcus continued his work, expanding affordable housing across multiple cities, becoming a national voice on urban development and economic justice. He'd married a professor he met at a conference, someone who valued his work and his heart. They had 2 children. He'd built a life that honored his mother's sacrifices and his own dreams. Years later, during an interview about his career, a journalist asked Marcus if he'd ever experienced class discrimination that shaped his work. He paused, then shared a condensed version of what happened with Victoria, without using her name. Someone once treated me like an experiment, he said, like my feelings and my life were entertainment for them and their friends. It taught me that some people genuinely can't see others as fully human, especially across class and race lines. But it also taught me that the best response to cruelty isn't more cruelty. It's building systems that create equity, dignity, and opportunity for everyone, even the people who hurt you. The journalist pressed. Do you think that person ever changed? Marcus smiled slightly. I hope so. Et genuinely do. Because everyone deserves a chance to become better than they were. That's literally what my entire career is about. Victoria watched that interview from her modest apartment, tears streaming down her face for what felt like the 1,000th time since that night at his birthday dinner. She'd changed, yes, but she'd never stopped carrying the weight of what she'd done. That was her burden to bear, not as punishment, but as a reminder that every person's humanity matters, that love isn't a game, that privilege comes with responsibility, and that sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you who you should have been all along. She turned off the interview and looked at the photo on her shelf. Not herself, but the clients she'd helped that month. Young people from wealth who'd come to her confused about why money hadn't made them happy, why their relationships felt hollow, why nothing felt real. She was helping them avoid becoming who she'd been. And in that work, she'd finally found something real herself. Marcus had saved her, not by giving her housing, but by showing her what it meant to be truly human. That was a real story. Not about revenge or karma, but about one person's grace being powerful enough to transform another person's entire life, even when that grace was completely undeserved. That's the kind of story that actually means something. And somewhere across the city, Marcus was reading his daughter a bedtime story, completely unaware that the woman who'd once broken his heart was now spending her life trying to prevent others from causing the same pain. He didn't need to know. He'd moved on to building something beautiful, which was always the point.